Battery's low. Yeah, plug it in. Fair, yep. I just wish it was faster. Yeah, plug it in. BHD here, and this Lenovo Legion Duel 2 is already the fastest, most powerful phone I've ever used, but there's so much more to a phone than just pure speed. And you know those people who like every couple weeks sort of make their way around headlines and YouTube comments saying phones are getting boring again and everything looks the same and there's no innovation anymore? This one's for you. So this is one of the weirdest phones I've ever seen, and it tries a bunch of new things. And they're not necessarily always fantastic ideas, but sometimes you gotta try a bunch of weird stuff to land on a great idea. So I'm just here to point the camera at the thing and show you what they've tried. So as you can probably tell from the name and the general aesthetic, it's a gaming phone, and they are not shy about it. So you know how some of the gaming phones lately started off pretty aggressive, but then have slowly started to get a little softer, at least aesthetically. Not this one. Not this one. This one barely really even looks like a phone at all. It honestly looks more just kind of like a mobile game console that happens to make phone calls and send texts, take pictures. So the whole thing is laid out horizontally, like this, because any real games on your phone are gonna be the horizontal ones. And so all the components inside are laid out horizontally. Now, when I tell you this phone has a 5,500 milliamp hour battery, you might be wondering, where could you fit that in a phone this shape? But that battery is split between the left side and the right side of the phone, literally. So 2,750 milliamp hours on the right and 2,750 on the left. And I actually think this is a great idea. It has multiple benefits. First of all, the sides of the phone where your fingers usually are actually stay cooler to the touch because of all the hot components that require cooling all being lined up in the middle. The weight distribution is also now perfectly even, and that lets them focus all of the cooling on just that smaller portion, just the middle of the phone. And that's exactly what they do. So you can see they gave it a whole turbine fan that happens to actually light up if you want it to. Gamery stuff. It's next to the RGB logo on the back. And there's a vent on each side to exhaust the hot air from the CPU, GPU, and motherboard, RAM, etc. There also doesn't have to be a separate camera bump because the cameras are in the middle too. I'm telling you, nothing about this phone is conventional. So you might remember pretty recently the whole dual battery turbocharging thing in some other phones, like VOOC charging and all that. OnePlus did it. And that would be literally because they'd have a split battery inside the phone. So phones with this tech could charge at 50 watts, for example, because both batteries would charge in parallel at 25 watts each. This phone kind of takes it to a hilarious extreme. There are two USB-C ports on the phone, and it comes with this 90-watt charging brick with two USB-C ports on the brick. And if you plug in the two included USB cables from the box into both of those USB-C ports and plug in both of the USB ports on the phone, one on the bottom, one on the side, you can charge this thing at 90 watts, which is crazy fast. You can get 50% charge from dead in 13 minutes, or literally go 0 to 100 in half an hour, which is very impressive for a battery this big. But it's also kind of hilarious seeing your phone plugged in twice. And it might be a little bit of a hassle to carry this heavy brick and two charging cables everywhere you go, but the satisfaction of plugging in both ports on the phone and seeing the animation light up and the battery percentage just starting to jump up, yeah, I'd say that's worth it. Plus, this is a phone with a lot of other well thought out battery options. So they offer bypass charging, so you can just power it from a cable instead of just the battery to avoid heat, like we saw with the ROG Phone 5. Also, there's all kinds of charging limiters to preserve long-term battery health. It's a nice trend to see this stuff more baked in. You can, of course, also always just plug in with one port, like any other lame phone with only one charging port. But of course, you're only going to get 45 watts that way, you know. But hey, being able to plug in from the side is way more comfortable if you're gaming, so that's why the gaming phones do that. Love it. But man, this phone has the works as far as hardware goes, as you'd expect. Dual front-facing speakers in this sort of aggressive triangular shape that gets very loud. Huge 6.92-inch, 144 hertz, 1080p OLED display up front with a ridiculous 720 hertz touch sampling rate and 1300 nits peak brightness. There's a ton of touch-sensitive remappable buttons on the sides and the back of this thing, so for gaming, it's got everything you need. And to drive all this, you've got the Snapdragon 888, up to half a terabyte of fast storage, and up to 18 gigs of RAM. So this is the most maxed out phone on paper again, and it definitely translates to responsiveness. There's no question about that. It's the snappiest phone I've ever laid hands on, even when you're not gaming, just flipping around the UI, multitasking, etc. But you know what? That's maybe the least important thing about a phone like this, right? It's a gaming phone. We want to know how it games, okay? Now, let's be real for a second. When it comes to mobile gaming, I would consider myself a bit of a casual. I think that's a fair description. Like, I've reviewed gaming phones before, but I don't play the most intensive games. It's kind of like reviewing a supercar without taking it to the track. Like, you get a better idea of what it's like to live with, sure, but it leaves out a pretty big reason why you'd get a car like that. So I could tell you from my extremely casual gaming use that this phone absolutely crushes everything, as you'd expect. It's actually overkill, usually. I don't get any functional advantage from a 720 hertz touch refresh rate when I'm playing Among Us. Like, it's really more than enough. But even when you're playing a heavier game like Asphalt 9, you can start to feel the combined advantages of everything this phone does start to come to life. The high refresh rate and the screen look incredible and super sharp and immersive, of course. The super high touch sample rate is great for making quick cuts and moves in the car, but also the customizable triggers on the shoulder of the phone come in handy because now you're touching the same spot on the screen over and over again for nitro and drifting, so you can just map those to the shoulder triggers. So that's really nice to never have to block the screen with my fingers. And there's way more than I'd ever need. This phone has 4 ultrasonic shoulder keys with 100 hertz touch sample refresh each, and 2 more rear capacitive touch points, plus you've got 2 more force touch spots on either side of the display. So obviously the games I played don't need all that, but if you do, you've got all these extra keys as an option. Now, if you're playing a game like Asphalt 9, after a while, pretty much any phone is going to start to get pretty warm. Now, the outside of this phone actually legit stayed a little bit cooler on the outsides where my fingers are versus the middle, which got warmer and spun up the fan and kept performance high. That is an actual real measurable benefit that I felt, not just a gimmick. And then something you also quickly notice, and I'll just have to describe it to you because it's kind of hard to show it on video. This phone has 2 haptic motors, 1 linear haptic motor on each side of the phone, and they combine to make a really strong, thumpy, punchy vibration motor. It is really impressive. I'm gonna say it's the most strong and impressive vibration I've felt in any phone. I don't think any other phone has 2. And so it's awesome when gaming. Any sort of like light interaction, footsteps, scraping by something, every gunfire really feels strong on this phone. I keep calling it a phone, but on this mobile gaming console. But also when you do just use it like a phone, like typing on the keyboard, an alarm clock, like everything you'd expect to vibrate, it is very strong. But hey, like I said, I'm just a casual. So I handed this phone to Andrew, resident gaming enthusiast here at the studio, but also a longtime PUBG player, handed him this phone with PUBG Mobile on it. And not exaggerating, his first game, he methodically sort of learns the mechanics through the first few minutes. He's getting some kills, picking up ammo and supplies. The circle starts shrinking. Other people start dying and he starts getting a few more kills. The fans start spinning up as the phone starts to hum along and keep those frames up. And sure enough, 7 kills later, he wins the game. His first game, chicken dinner. Made it look easy. Now, I'm not saying this phone is the reason why he won, but that is pretty impressive. Now, when you're in a game and you just want to toggle a setting or something like that real quick, you can just swipe down from the top. And then you have a bunch of quickly accessible settings, mostly to do with gaming. Your volume, brightness, signal strength, and your ping is sitting there. And then your CPU and GPU clock speed just for kicks, but also with a rampage button to literally max out the clock speeds to keep those frames up at all costs. Then there's also the bypass charge toggle if you want to turn that on and you're plugged in. And there's also something here you can see called stream mode. All right, you ready for this? This is one last gimmick, I promise. This is a last crazy thing. The selfie camera is inside the power button, of course. So that's a 44 megapixel motorized live stream ready selfie camera that's literally oriented horizontally all the time because its primary purpose is to be your webcam if you want to stream your games directly to Twitch or YouTube. That's right, the phone is not only ready to max out your games, but it's ready to broadcast your games with that extremely average quality selfie camera. I'd expect nothing less. Also, it's really loud to open and close. Anyway, this is amazing. There's honestly no other phone I've ever used that's quite like this, and it's so weird to keep saying that it's a phone just because it feels like the phone functionality in this is such an afterthought. It happens to do other things. Like, do you even care about the camera quality in a phone like this? There happens to be a 64 megapixel primary camera on the back that's literally blocked when you open up the camera app because the way you normally hold a phone puts your fingers right over it. But it happens to pair that with 123 degree ultra wide. And collectively, they both take reasonable, acceptable photos in good light. This thing happens to also send text messages and make phone calls if you really want it to. It can also use the internet and browse through other apps. And it can be an amazing alarm clock with those huge haptics and gigantic speakers. But all of that feels like it just happens to be true at this point. This is just, it's the ultimate all-in on the gaming phone again. It's not trying to hide it or be shy about it and do things like wireless charging or water resistance. It kind of doesn't matter at this level. It's just a mobile gaming handheld with cellular. So even if it's not for me, I'm glad they made it. I'm glad this exists, and I would happily recommend it to other people I know who are much more into mobile gaming. But speaking of that, that's the question I want to ask you. That's what I want to leave you with for this video. Do any of you watching this video actually consider buying a gaming phone? Like, do any of you play a game on your phone so much that you would specifically get a phone tailored to being better at that? And if so, what game are you playing? Let me know in the comment section below if you know that guy, if you are that guy. Either way, that's been it. Thanks for watching. Catch you guys in the next one.